The crosshairs settled on a man's forehead 6,000 meters away. At this distance, he was nothing more than a heat shimmer dancing in the desert scope, a ghost of a target that physics said couldn't be hit. The wind was wrong. The angle was impossible. The mathematics were suicide. But Staff Sergeant Elena "Viper" Vasquez had stopped believing in impossible 3 wars ago. Her finger hovered over the trigger as voices crackled through her earpiece, panicked, desperate, running out of time. Negative on the shot, negative on the shot. No sniper in the world can make that distance. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. And in 30 seconds, she was going to prove it in the most spectacular way imaginable. The story had started 6 hours earlier, when nobody knew who she really was. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Dawn broke cold and gray over Forward Operating Base Sentinel, casting long shadows across the concrete barriers and razor wire that separated civilization from the hostile desert beyond. The morning air tasted of dust and diesel fuel, carrying the distant sound of generators humming their endless mechanical prayer. In the equipment yard behind the main compound, a lone figure moved between the stacked crates with quiet efficiency. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez looked like someone who preferred to be overlooked. Average height, brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing standard-issue desert camouflage that hung loose enough to hide the lean muscle underneath. At 28, she had learned the art of being invisible. She walked with her shoulders slightly hunched, her gaze cast downward, her movements deliberately unremarkable. To anyone watching, she appeared to be just another logistics specialist doing her morning inventory, counting supplies and checking serial numbers with methodical precision. But the details told a different story for those who knew how to read them. Her hands moved with a surgeon's control as she lifted each crate, testing weight and balance with unconscious expertise. When a construction worker across the yard accidentally triggered a pneumatic drill, her head snapped toward the sound with the instant alertness of someone who had learned to distinguish between harmless noise and incoming death. Most telling of all was the way she positioned herself. Even while checking mundane supply lists, she kept her back to solid cover and maintained clear sightlines to all approaches. It was the unconscious habit of someone who had spent years in places where relaxation could be fatal. She paused beside a shipment of optical equipment, her clipboard forgotten for a moment as she examined a scope case with the reverence of someone who understood precision instruments. Her fingers traced the manufacturer's marking, Night Force, and something old and familiar flickered behind her dark eyes. "Vasquez!" The shout cut across the yard like a whip crack. Master Sergeant Dale Morrison approached with his typical swagger, a thick-set man in his 40s who wore his authority like body armor. His face carried the permanent scowl of someone convinced the world existed to inconvenience him personally. "You done playing with the fancy glass?" Morrison's tone dripped with condescension. "We've got real work to do." Elena straightened slowly, her expression neutral. "Just conducting the optical inventory, Master Sergeant. Everything's accounted for." Morrison snatched the clipboard from her hands, scanning the neat columns of numbers with theatrical skepticism. "Optical inventory," he repeated mockingly. "What's a supply clerk need to know about scopes anyway? These aren't for looking at spreadsheets." A small group of soldiers had gathered to watch the exchange, their expressions ranging from amused to uncomfortable. Among them stood Corporal Jake Mitchell, a young sniper fresh from training, and Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, Morrison's second-in-command, who rarely challenged his authority. "Matter of fact," Morrison continued, warming to his performance, "I heard something interesting about you, Vasquez. Something about a call sign." His grin turned ugly. "What was it again? Viper?" Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's not relevant to my current assignment, Master Sergeant." Morrison laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed off the concrete walls. "Viper? Can you believe that? This little supply clerk thinks she's some kind of deadly snake." He looked around at his audience, encouraging their participation in the humiliation. Corporal Mitchell shifted uncomfortably. "Master Sergeant, maybe what?" Morrison's voice rose dangerously. Maybe we should pretend that counting ammo boxes makes you a shooter. Maybe we should believe every bullshit story that gets passed around." He stepped closer to Elena, his bulk casting a shadow over her. "I've been in the Army for 22 years, and I've never heard of any female sniper called Viper. You know why? Because it's fantasy." Elena remained perfectly still, her breathing controlled and even. She didn't defend herself, didn't argue, didn't explain. Her silence seemed to infuriate Morrison even more. "You want to know what I think?" Morrison's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "I think you bought some old gear at a surplus store and made up a fancy story to go with it. I think you're living in a fantasy where you're some kind of warrior princess instead of what you really are, a clerk who can't handle real soldier work." The yard had gone completely quiet. Even the distant generator seemed to hum more softly, as if the machinery itself was holding its breath. Elena looked directly at Morrison for the first time since the conversation began. Her dark eyes were calm, almost serene, but there was something beneath the surface that made several observers take an unconscious step backward. "Is there anything else you need, Master Sergeant?" Her voice was steady, professional, utterly devoid of emotion. Morrison's face flushed red. He had expected anger, tears, or desperate protests. The controlled calm unsettled him more than any outburst would have. "Yeah, there's something else," he snarled. "You're off equipment inventory. From now on, you're on sanitation detail. Maybe scrubbing toilets will remind you of your actual place in this man's army." "Understood." Elena retrieved her clipboard and walked away without another word, her pace unhurried, her posture unchanged. As she disappeared around the corner of a supply building, the gathered soldiers began to disperse, but the tension lingered in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Corporal Mitchell approached Morrison hesitantly. "Master Sergeant, I've heard stories about a sniper called Viper, some of the guys from 3rd Battalion." "3rd Battalion tells a lot of stories," Morrison cut him off. "Doesn't make them true. You'd be smart to focus on reality instead of ghost stories." But as Mitchell walked away, he couldn't shake the memory of Elena's eyes, the way they had tracked the sound of the pneumatic drill, the complete absence of fear when Morrison tried to intimidate her, the almost predatory stillness that had surrounded her like an aura. Those weren't the eyes of a supply clerk. Meanwhile, in the privacy of her small quarters, Elena sat on the edge of her narrow bunk and opened a locked footlocker she rarely touched. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth, lay a worn leather journal. She opened it to a page marked with a faded photograph, herself in full combat gear, rifle in hand, standing beside her spotter in the mountains of Afghanistan. The photo was signed in black ink. "Viper, 127 confirmed. The impossible made routine. Command." She closed the journal without reading the entries, her fingers lingering on the photo for just a moment. The woman in the picture looked like a stranger, harder, younger, carrying the weight of a war that had ended but never really left. A distant rumble shook the building as helicopters passed overhead, probably a routine patrol. But Elena's hand moved instinctively to her hip, reaching for a sidearm that wasn't there, muscle memory from a life she had tried to leave behind. She forced herself to relax, to remember where she was and who she was supposed to be. Just a supply clerk. Just someone who counted inventory and filled out forms and tried very hard not to be noticed. But deep in the Afghan mountains, enemies were moving, and whether she wanted to admit it or not, the war was about to find her again. 3 days passed, and Morrison's harassment escalated with each sunrise. Elena found herself assigned to increasingly demeaning tasks, cleaning grease traps in the motor pool, scrubbing floors in the mess hall at 400 hours, hauling garbage across the base in the brutal afternoon heat. Each assignment came with Morrison's signature smirk and a new variation of the same humiliating theme. "How's that sniper training working out for you, Vasquez?" he called as she emerged from the latrine facility, carrying a mop bucket. "I hear toilet cleaning is excellent preparation for long-range shooting." His faithful audience of junior NCOs laughed on cue, though some looked increasingly uncomfortable with the prolonged campaign of humiliation. The breaking point came during the weekly weapons qualification briefing. The base's shooting range buzzed with the controlled chaos of soldiers preparing for their quarterly marksmanship tests. Elena sat in the back of the briefing room, trying to remain invisible as Rangemaster Chief Warrant Officer Thompson reviewed safety protocols and scoring standards. This quarter, we're introducing long-range precision challenges, Thompson announced. Targets at 800, 1,000, and 1,200 meters for qualified marksmen. The Army's raising standards, and we need to meet them. Morrison's hand shot up. Chief, what about the fantasy snipers? You know, the ones who claim they can hit impossible distances? His gaze swept the room before landing on Elena. I'd hate for anyone to embarrass themselves trying to live up to their fictional reputation. Thompson frowned. Master Sergeant, is there a specific concern about safety protocols? Just making sure we separate fact from fiction, Chief. Some people around here seem confused about their actual capabilities. Elena felt every eye in the room turn toward her. The not-so-subtle targeting was impossible to miss. She kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Corporal Mitchell, who had been quietly researching Elena's background for days, finally found his voice. Chief, I've been asking around about. Morrison cut him off with a sharp gesture. Mitchell, unless you have a question about range safety, keep it to yourself. Thompson's weathered face showed growing irritation. If there's a personal issue here, Master Sergeant, handle it outside my briefing. No personal issue, Chief. Just concerned about soldiers making claims they can't back up. Maybe we should have a demonstration. Let our resident Viper show us these legendary skills. Morrison's voice carried the cruel satisfaction of a predator circling wounded prey. The briefing room fell silent. Elena could feel the weight of dozens of stares, the mixture of curiosity and second-hand embarrassment from soldiers who recognized a public execution when they saw one. She stood slowly, her movement deliberate and controlled. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the room without any trace of anger or defensiveness. Master Sergeant, if Chief Thompson authorizes it, I'd be happy to demonstrate. Morrison's grin widened. This was exactly what he'd been pushing toward, the moment when Elena would humiliate herself publicly and he could finally crush whatever delusions she harbored about her military prowess. Thompson looked between them, sensing undercurrents he didn't fully understand. What kind of demonstration are we talking about? Standard marksmanship, Elena replied calmly. Whatever distance and target you deem appropriate. Morrison leaned forward eagerly. How about we skip the easy stuff? Viper here claims to be a sniper. Let's see her hit something challenging. Say, 1,500 meters? A collective intake of breath swept the room. 1,500 meters was beyond the effective range of most rifles available on the base, requiring exceptional skill, perfect conditions, and specialized equipment. That's outside normal qualification parameters, Thompson said slowly. But not impossible, Elena said quietly, if you have suitable equipment and appropriate safety clearance. Thompson studied her with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent 30 years around weapons and the soldiers who wielded them. Something in Elena's demeanor, the absolute lack of bravado, the calm certainty, gave him pause. We have one rifle capable of that range, he said finally. Barrett M82A1, but it requires specialized training to operate safely. I'm familiar with the platform, Elena replied. Morrison's laughter filled the room. Familiar with it? From what, reading the manual? Chief, this is getting ridiculous. Let's stop wasting everyone's time. But Thompson was still studying Elena, noting details others had missed. The way she held herself, the precise economical movements, the complete absence of nervous energy that typically accompanied false bravado. All right, Thompson said finally. Tomorrow morning, 0600 hours, range 7. We'll set up a target at 1,500 meters. But understand, Staff Sergeant, he emphasized her rank deliberately, a subtle rebuke to Morrison's condescending treatment. This isn't a game. If you can't safely operate that rifle, we stop immediately. Elena nodded once. Understood, Chief. As soldiers filed out of the briefing room, excited chatter filled the air. Word of the challenge spread through the base like wildfire. By evening, it seemed like every soldier at FOB Sentinel knew about the showdown scheduled for dawn. Morrison found Elena later that evening as she finished her sanitation duties. His earlier confidence had evolved into something uglier, the anticipation of complete victory mixed with genuine malice. You know what's going to happen tomorrow, don't you? he said, blocking her path between storage buildings. "You're going to embarrass yourself in front of the entire base. That big rifle is going to knock you flat on your ass, and everyone's going to see exactly what you really are." Elena set down her cleaning supplies and looked at him directly. In the dim light between buildings, something in her expression made Morrison's confident smirk waver slightly. "Master Sergeant," she said quietly, "is there anything else you need tonight?" Morrison stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. "Yeah, there's something else. When you fail tomorrow, and you will fail, I want you to apologize, publicly, for wasting everyone's time with your fantasy bullshit." Elena remained perfectly still. "And if I don't fail?" Morrison's laugh was ugly. "If you somehow manage not to embarrass yourself completely, I'll personally request your transfer to a combat unit. Put your money where your mouth is. See how long you last in the real army." "That's acceptable," Elena replied without hesitation. Something in her immediate agreement unnerved Morrison. He had expected negotiation, fear, or desperate attempts to back down. Instead, she had agreed to stakes that could end her comfortable rear echelon assignment and thrust her back into active combat. "You're making a mistake, Vasquez," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Elena picked up her cleaning supplies and walked past him without another word. As she disappeared into the darkness, Morrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. For the first time since this campaign began, doubt crept into his certainty. Something about Elena's complete lack of fear suggested he might have miscalculated badly. But it was too late to back down now. Tomorrow morning, in front of the entire base, one of them was going to be proven right. Morrison just wasn't sure anymore which one it would be. Dawn arrived at Forward Sentinel with the pale, unforgiving light of Judgment Day. By 05:45 hours, Range 7 was surrounded by more soldiers than had gathered for any event in the base's recent history. Word had spread through every barracks, every mess hall, every duty station. The impossible shot challenge had become the most anticipated spectacle anyone could remember. Elena arrived precisely at 600, carrying only a small canvas bag, and wearing the same unremarkable expression she had maintained for weeks. The crowd parted slightly as she walked toward the firing line, but she seemed oblivious to the hundreds of eyes tracking her movement. Chief Thompson stood beside a massive rifle case, his weathered face unreadable. The Barrett M82A1 lay disassembled inside custom foam padding, its components gleaming with the precision of serious engineering. Morrison positioned himself where the entire crowd could see him, his arms crossed, his smirk broadcasting absolute confidence in the coming humiliation. Several junior officers had gathered near him, including Captain Sarah Chen, the base's intelligence officer, who watched the proceedings with unusual intensity. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez," Thompson called out formally, "before we proceed, I need verbal confirmation that you're familiar with this weapon system." Elena approached the rifle case and knelt beside it. Her hands moved over the components with casual familiarity, not touching yet, but clearly cataloging each piece. "Barrett M82E1, she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the morning stillness. ".50 caliber, semi-automatic, anti-material rifle. Effective range approximately 1,800 meters with proper ammunition. Uses a short recoil operation with a rotating bolt." Thompson nodded approvingly. "Assembly?" Without hesitation, Elena began lifting components from the case. Her movements were swift, precise, automatic. The upper and lower receivers clicked together with mechanical certainty. The barrel assembly slid into place with the smooth confidence of someone who had performed this action countless times. The crowd grew quieter as they watched. This wasn't someone fumbling with unfamiliar equipment. Every motion carried the unconscious expertise of deep muscle memory. Morrison's smirk began to fade as Elena completed the assembly in under 90 seconds, faster than most specialized armorers could manage. "Ammunition?" Elena asked, her tone still conversational. Thompson handed her a magazine loaded with match-grade 50 BMG rounds. Elena examined the cartridges briefly, checking the brass for consistency, the bullets for proper seating. "Distance to target?" she asked. 1,500 meters, Thompson replied. "Steel plate, 18 by 24 inches. Elena nodded and moved to the firing position. She didn't rush to the rifle. Instead, she stood behind the line for a full minute, studying the range through naked eyes. The crowd watched, confused by the delay. Morrison shifted impatiently, but Elena was reading the environment with senses honed by years of life and death precision. She watched heat shimmer rising from the desert floor, noted wind direction by observing dust movement at different elevations, studied the light angle and shadow patterns that would affect her sight picture. Finally, she knelt behind the Barrett and began adjusting the scope with methodical precision. Each click of the turrets was deliberate, calculated. She worked with the quiet concentration of someone solving a complex equation. Captain Chen leaned toward Thompson. "Chief, where did she learn to do that?" Thompson's reply was barely audible. "That's not standard training." Elena chambered around with a distinct metallic snap that echoed across the range. She settled into the firing position with the fluid grace of someone returning home after a long absence. Her breathing slowed to an almost meditative rhythm. The massive rifle, which could knock an untrained shooter backward with its recoil, seemed to mold itself to her body as if they were designed for each other. The range fell completely silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Elena's finger found the trigger. Her eye aligned with the scope. 1,500 meters away, a steel target waited, a speck of metal that seemed impossible to hit even with the most advanced equipment. She exhaled slowly, steadily, until her lungs were nearly empty. The Barrett erupted. The sound was massive, thunderous, a rolling explosion that echoed off every surface and vibrated through the chests of everyone watching. Elena absorbed the recoil with minimal movement, her body handling the tremendous energy with practiced ease. 1,500 meters away, the steel target rang like a massive bell as the .50 caliber round struck dead center. The range exploded with shocked voices. Soldiers who had come expecting entertainment found themselves witnessing something extraordinary. Morrison's face drained of color. His confident smirk vanished completely, replaced by the hollow expression of someone whose worldview had just been shattered. But Elena wasn't finished. She worked the bolt smoothly, chambering a second round. Her voice cut through the excited chatter. "Chief, is the 2,000-meter target available?" Thompson stared at her. "Staff Sergeant, that's beyond the rifle's effective." "Is it available?" Elena repeated calmly. Thompson looked toward the far end of the range, where a steel silhouette stood barely visible even through binoculars. It's there." Elena made additional scope adjustments, her movements now drawing the intense attention of everyone present. The excited chatter died away, as soldiers realized they weren't just watching a successful shot, they were watching someone operating at a level they hadn't known existed. The second shot thundered across the desert. 2 seconds later, the distant ring of impacting steel drifted back across the impossible distance. Morrison stumbled backward as if physically struck. The impossible had happened twice. This wasn't luck. This wasn't beginner's fortune. This was expertise so far beyond normal that it redefined what normal meant. Elena set the rifle down carefully and stood. She looked directly at Morrison for the first time since arriving at the range. "Master Sergeant," she said quietly, "you mentioned transferring me to a combat unit. I accept that recommendation." But before Morrison could respond, Captain Chen's radio crackled with an urgent transmission that would change everything. "Base operations to intelligence, priority alert. We have confirmed enemy sniper activity on objectives north of the base. Long-range engagement, multiple friendly casualties. Request immediate counter-sniper support." Chen's face went pale as she listened to the details. She looked at Elena with sudden understanding, then keyed her radio. "Operations, intelligence. What's the estimated distance to enemy shooter?" "Static." Then, "Intelligence, be advised. Target appears to be engaging from extreme range. Estimate 5,500 to 6,000 meters. Repeat, 6,000 meters. No current assets capable of counter-engagement at that distance." The range fell silent as the implications sank in. 6,000 meters, an impossible distance that exceeded every weapon system on the base. Every weapon except the one Elena had just demonstrated mastery over. Chen looked at Elena with desperate hope. "Staff Sergeant, is that distance theoretically possible?" Elena was already moving toward the rifle, her entire demeanor shifting from quiet supply clerk to something harder, more focused, infinitely more dangerous. "Captain," she said, her voice carrying a new authority that made everyone present stand straighter. "I need wind readings, atmospheric data, and exact coordinates, and I need them now." The legend called Viper had just stepped back into the war. The base operations center erupted with controlled chaos as reports flooded in from the forward observation post. "Base, this is Overwatch 7, the radio crackled with desperation. "We've lost our spotter. Snipers in the rocks somewhere north of Grid 41S QB 1234-516-8. He's picking us apart and we can't even see muzzle flash. Distance has got to be impossible. Maybe 6 clicks out." Captain Chen coordinated from the operations center, while Elena knelt beside a detailed topographical map, her finger tracing elevation lines and calculating angles with frightening speed. "Overwatch 7, describe your casualties," Chen transmitted. "Base, we've got 3 down. Sergeant Martinez took a round through the chest, clean through his plate carrier. Thompson's hit in the shoulder. Rodriguez..." A pause filled with static and grief. "Rodriguez is KIA, single shot, center mass from a direction we can't even identify." Elena's jaw tightened as she listened. Her pencil moved across the map, marking wind patterns, elevation changes, and sight lines with the precision of someone who had studied this type of problem for years. "Captain," Elena said quietly, "I need immediate access to meteorological data, a GPS-enabled rangefinder, and a secure communications link to the observation post." Chen stared at her. "Staff Sergeant, the enemy sniper is operating at a distance our doctrine says is impossible. Even if we could reach him, the target acquisition alone..." 6,000 meters is not impossible," Elena interrupted, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "It's difficult. It requires specific conditions and specialized equipment, but it's not impossible." Morrison, who had followed them from the range, found his voice. "This is insane! You can't seriously be considering..." Elena turned to face him directly. For the first time since their confrontation began, her composure cracked slightly, revealing something cold and dangerous underneath. "Master Sergeant," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more authority than any shout, 3 soldiers are dead or wounded. Because an enemy sniper is operating at extreme range, I have the capability to neutralize that threat. Unless you have a better suggestion, I recommend you step aside and let me work." The operations center fell silent. Even the radio chatter seemed to quiet as Elena's words hung in the air. Morrison looked around the room, seeking support, but found only faces turned toward Elena with growing hope and desperate expectation. Chief Thompson appeared in the doorway, carrying a specialized case. "Barrett M107A1, he announced. "Our longest-range precision rifle. If anyone's going to attempt this shot, they'll need the best equipment we have." Elena nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Chief. I'll also need a ballistics computer, wine measurement equipment, and access to the highest observation point on the base." "Already arranged," Chen said. "Tower 7 has clear sightlines north and communications equipment, but Elena..." Chen hesitated over the informal address. "The mathematics alone. One drift at that distance, bullet drop, atmospheric conditions." Elena was already moving toward the equipment, her hands checking components with practiced efficiency. "Captain, I've made longer shots under worse conditions. The key is patience, preparation, and accepting that some calculations can't be done with computers." As she worked, Elena's entire bearing transformed. Gone was the quiet supply clerk who avoided attention. In her place stood someone harder, more focused, carrying herself with the unconscious authority of someone who had commanded life-and-death situations before. "Overwatch 7, Elena keyed the radio herself. "This is base counter sniper. I need precise coordinates on your casualties' positions when they were hit, exact timestamps, and any environmental observations. Wind direction, temperature, anything you've noticed." The voice from Overwatch 7 carried new hope. "Counter sniper, Roger. Finally got someone who can reach this bastard?" Elena paused before responding, her finger hovering over the transmit key. When she spoke, her voice carried quiet confidence that somehow transmitted across the radio waves. "Overwatch 7, I'm going to end this. Keep your heads down and give me 15 minutes. Elena moved through the base with purposeful strides, carrying the specialized rifle and ballistics equipment toward Tower 7. Soldiers stepped aside without being asked, instinctively recognizing someone operating with complete focus and authority. Behind her, Captain Chen coordinated with base meteorology, while Morrison stood frozen in the operations center, finally understanding that he had spent weeks humiliating someone far beyond his ability to comprehend. As Elena climbed the tower stairs, Corporal Mitchell caught up with her, carrying additional ammunition and wind measurement equipment. "Staff Sergeant," he said quietly. "I've been researching. There was a sniper in Afghanistan, call sign Viper, who held the record for longest confirmed kill. They said she could make impossible shots in impossible conditions." Elena didn't slow her pace. "And? The record was 5,147 meters in the mountains outside Kandahar. Single shot, moving target, high wind conditions." Mitchell's voice carried growing awe. "They said it was the most difficult shot ever made by an American sniper." Elena reached the top of the tower and began setting up her equipment without responding to Mitchell's obvious question. But as she aligned the rifle and began her calculations, her voice carried softly across the wind. "That wasn't my longest shot." The desert stretched before her, hiding an enemy sniper who thought distance made him untouchable. In 15 minutes, Elena was going to prove him wrong in the most decisive way possible. The real Viper had finally returned to the war. Tower 7 provided a commanding view of the northern desert, where heat shimmer danced across endless ridges and hidden valleys. Elena worked with methodical precision, transforming the observation platform into a precision shooting position that would have impressed the most demanding instructor. The Barrett M107A1 rested on a specialized bipod, its massive bulk steady against the concrete barrier. Elena had positioned herself to minimize wind interference while maintaining optimal sight lines across the target area. Captain Chen climbed the tower stairs, carrying a tablet loaded with meteorological data. Behind her came Chief Thompson, Corporal Mitchell, and, reluctantly, Master Sergeant Morrison, who seemed drawn by a mixture of morbid curiosity and dawning horror at what he had unleashed. "Weather data," Chen announced breathlessly. "Wind speed varying between 12 and 18 knots, shifting between northwest and north-northwest. Temperature 78 degrees and rising, barometric pressure stable." Elena absorbed the information without looking up from her scope. Her fingers made minute adjustments to the turrets, each click representing calculations that seemed to happen automatically in her mind. "Distance to probable sniper position?" she asked. Chen consulted her tablet. "Based on the casualties' positions and estimated bullet trajectories, approximately 5,950 to 6,200 meters. The target area spans roughly 400 meters of ridgeline with multiple concealed positions." Elena nodded, her eye pressed to the scope as she scanned the distant terrain. At 6,000 meters, even with maximum magnification, potential targets appeared as barely perceptible irregularities in the landscape. "Chief," she said without moving from her position, "I need you to coordinate with Overwatch 7. When I call for it, they'll fire a marking round at the suspected sniper position. I need to see exactly where they think the threat is located." Thompson keyed his radio. "Overwatch 7, base tower. Prepare to mark target with 1 round on command." Elena's breathing had settled into the deep, measured rhythm that Mitchell now recognized from specialized sniper training videos. But this was different. Calmer, more controlled, with the absolute stillness of someone who had made shots like this before. Morrison watched from the corner of the tower, his earlier arrogance replaced by growing unease. "Staff Sergeant," he said quietly, "even if you can reach that distance, target acquisition alone." "Master Sergeant," Elena interrupted without moving from her scope, "please maintain radio silence unless you have tactical information to contribute." The rebuke was delivered so calmly, with such natural authority, that Morrison found himself stepping back without conscious thought. Captain Chen studied Elena's setup with professional interest. The rifle position, the calculation methods, the environmental considerations, everything demonstrated expertise far beyond standard Army training. "Elena," Chen said carefully, "this is beyond anything they teach in basic marksmanship. Where did you learn to shoot like this?" For the first time since beginning her preparations, Elena lifted her head from the scope. She looked directly at Chen, and for a moment her carefully maintained anonymity cracked slightly. "Captain, there are some schools the Army doesn't advertise. Some courses that don't appear on standard training records. Some capabilities they only teach to people who are going places where normal rules don't apply. Chen felt a chill of understanding. Special operations. Elena returned to her scope without confirmation, but her silence was answer enough. Corporal Mitchell had been quietly recording everything on his phone, documenting what might be the most extraordinary marksmanship demonstration in modern military history. Now he looked at the footage with new understanding. "Staff Sergeant," Mitchell said hesitantly, "I looked up the record for longest confirmed sniper kill. It was made by a female sniper in Afghanistan, call sign Viper, but the details are classified above my clearance level." Elena's finger paused over the scope adjustment. "Corporal, focus on your observation duties." But Chief Thompson was studying Elena with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent decades around exceptional shooters. Details that had seemed unremarkable before now took on new significance. "The way you assembled that Barrett this morning," Thompson said slowly. "The speed, the familiarity. That's not standard infantry training." Elena made a final scope adjustment and settled into her shooting position. "Chief, I need Overwatch 7 to fire their marking round now." Thompson keyed the radio. "Overwatch 7, mark your target, 1 round." 6,000 meters away, a small puff of dust erupted against a rocky ridge as the marking round impacted. Elena tracked the location through her scope, her breathing slowing even further. "Target acquired," she said quietly. Through the powerful optics, Elena could barely make out the irregular shadow that might be an enemy position. At this distance, confirmation was impossible until the moment of engagement. She began her final calculations, factoring in wind speed at multiple elevations, temperature gradients, atmospheric pressure, and the complex ballistics of a .50 caliber projectile traveling nearly 4 miles. "Overwatch 7, Elena keyed the radio herself. "I have eyes on the probable sniper position. Maintain observation and be prepared to confirm impact." "Roger, counter-sniper, standing by." Elena settled behind the rifle with the finality of someone who had made this decision countless times before. The massive weapon seemed to mold itself to her body, becoming an extension of her will rather than a separate tool. The tower fell completely silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Elena's voice carried quietly across the observation platform, speaking to herself in the ritual words of someone about to attempt the impossible. "Wind full value, left to right. Distance 6,000 meters, elevation, maximum." She exhaled slowly, steadily, until her lungs were nearly empty. The Barrett erupted with thunderous authority. The shot echoed across the desert like the voice of an angry god rolling through valleys and bouncing off distant ridges. Elena absorbed the massive recoil with minimal movement, immediately working the bolt to chamber a second round while maintaining her sight picture. For 8 long seconds, the world held its breath. Then, Overwatch 7's voice crackled through the radio, filled with disbelief and desperate relief. "Base, this is Overwatch 7. Target down. I say again, target is down. The sniper is neutralized." The tower erupted with shocked exclamation. Captain Chen stared at Elena as if seeing her for the first time. Chief Thompson shook his head in amazement. Corporal Mitchell continued recording, his hands trembling with the magnitude of what he had just witnessed. Morrison stood frozen against the tower wall, his face pale as the full reality crashed over him. He had spent weeks humiliating a legend, mocking someone whose capabilities exceeded anything he could imagine. Elena set the rifle down carefully and stood. She looked out across the desert toward the distant ridge where an enemy sniper would never threaten American soldiers again. "Overwatch 7, she keyed the radio. "Confirm no further enemy activity. Maintain observation for 30 minutes, then proceed with casualty evacuation." "Roger, counter-sniper, and thank you. You just saved our lives." Elena didn't respond to the gratitude. She began breaking down her equipment with the same methodical precision she had used to set it up. Captain Chen approached carefully, as if Elena might disappear if startled. "Staff Sergeant, that was impossible. I need to know who you really are." Elena paused in her equipment breakdown and looked directly at Chen. For the first time since arriving at FOB Sentinel, she dropped the careful anonymity she had maintained. Captain, my name is Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, former 1st Special Forces Group Airborne, designated marksman and counter-sniper specialist. Call sign. She paused, glancing at Morrison. Call sign Viper. The words hung in the air like a revelation. Everything suddenly made sense. The equipment familiarity, the calm under pressure, the absolute confidence in attempting an impossible shot. Chief Thompson stepped forward with something approaching reverence. Staff Sergeant, what was the distance on that shot? Elena consulted her ballistics computer. 6,127 meters. Confirmed kill at 6,227 meters. Mitchell's phone nearly slipped from his trembling hands. That's a world record. Elena shouldered her equipment and moved toward the tower stairs. Corporal, that's classified until otherwise directed. As she descended toward the base where her new reality waited, Elena felt the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. She had tried to hide from what she was, tried to disappear into anonymity and routine. But some capabilities couldn't be buried. Some skills were too important to waste. Some legends were meant to be lived, not forgotten. Viper had returned to the war, and this time, she wasn't planning to disappear again. Word of the impossible shot spread through FOB Sentinel like wildfire, racing across dry grass. By the time Elena descended from Tower 7, clusters of soldiers had gathered throughout the base, their voices carrying fragments of disbelief, awe, and growing understanding. The supply clerk who had scrubbed toilets that morning had just made the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history. Elena walked toward the armory to secure her equipment, but her path was blocked by a growing crowd of personnel who seemed unsure whether to salute, applaud, or simply stare in amazement. Is it true? Sergeant First Class Maria Santos pushed through the crowd, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Did you really hit a target at 6,000 meters? Elena paused, her expression carefully neutral. The threat has been neutralized. Overwatch 7 is secure. But Santos wasn't satisfied with tactical brevity. Staff Sergeant, I need to know. My brother was at Overwatch 7. He was one of the wounded. Did you save his life? Elena met Santos's gaze directly. Something in the woman's desperate hope broke through Elena's professional reserve. Your brother is safe, Elena said quietly. The enemy sniper will never threaten him again. Santos's composure cracked. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the full magnitude hit her. She snapped to attention and delivered the sharpest salute of her career. Thank you, she whispered. Elena returned the salute with equal precision, but her attention was drawn by approaching footsteps. Captain Chen strode across the courtyard, carrying a folder thick with official documents. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, Chen called formally, I need you to report to the command post immediately. We have some questions about your background. The crowd began to disperse reluctantly, but Elena noticed that soldiers no longer looked through her as if she were invisible. Their gazes carried respect, curiosity, and something approaching reverence. In the command post, Colonel James Harrison waited behind a conference table covered with printouts, photographs, and classified files. The base commander was a lean, graying man whose expression revealed nothing as Elena entered and stood at attention. At ease, Staff Sergeant, Harrison said. Please sit down. Elena remained standing. Sir, I prefer to stand. Harrison studied her for a long moment, then opened the folder before him. I've been reviewing some interesting documents. Your official personnel file shows assignment to logistics duties, standard training certifications, unremarkable service record. Elena waited silently. But when I requested your complete service history from Special Operations Command, I received a very different picture. Harrison lifted a photograph from the file. This was taken in Afghanistan, 2019. Recognize anyone? The photo showed Elena in full combat gear, standing beside her spotter in mountain terrain. She was younger, harder, carrying the specialized rifle that had made her legendary. That's me, sir, Elena confirmed. Harrison placed additional documents on the table. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, 1st Special Forces Group Airborne, specialized training in long-range precision marksmanship and counter-sniper operations. Deployed to Afghanistan for 3 tours, classified missions involving target elimination at extreme range. Elena's jaw tightened slightly, but but she remained silent. Your unofficial call sign was Viper, Harrison continued. 127 confirmed kills, including several that redefined the boundaries of what was considered possible in precision shooting. Captain Chen had been listening from the doorway. Now she stepped forward, her expression mixing admiration with confusion. Sir, if Staff Sergeant Vasquez has this background, why was she assigned to supply duties? This seems like a massive waste of specialized capability. Harrison's expression softened slightly. That's an excellent question, Captain. Staff Sergeant, would you care to explain? For the first time since entering the command post, Elena's carefully controlled composure showed cracks. She looked at the photograph of her younger self, and something painful flickered across her face. Sir, I requested the transfer to non-combat duties. I wanted to step back from active operations. Why? Harrison's question was gentle but insistent. Elena was quiet for so long that Harrison began to think she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of old trauma. My spotter in Afghanistan was Sergeant Patrick Coleman. We worked together for 18 months. He was... Elena paused, searching for words. He was the best partner I ever had. Patient, precise, absolutely reliable under pressure. She picked up the photograph, her fingers tracing Patrick's image. On our final mission, we were tasked with eliminating a high-value target who was using a school as cover. Children were present, civilian adults. The shot was technically possible, but the risk of collateral damage was significant. Harrison leaned forward slightly. What happened? I hesitated. For the first time in my career, I hesitated to take a shot because I was afraid of hitting an innocent child. That hesitation lasted approximately 3 seconds. Elena's voice grew quieter. In those 3 seconds, enemy forces identified our position. Patrick died trying to cover our extraction. The command post fell completely silent. Elena set the photograph down carefully. Sir, I concluded that my effectiveness as a sniper had been compromised by my inability to accept necessary risks. I requested transfer to duties where my hesitation couldn't cost lives. Harrison studied Elena with the calculating gaze of a commander who understood the weight of impossible decisions. Staff Sergeant, today you eliminated an enemy sniper at a distance that military doctrine considers impossible. You saved multiple American lives without hesitation. Does that sound like someone who has lost their effectiveness? Elena met his gaze directly. Sir, today was different. There were no civilians in the target area, no children at risk. The calculation was clean. And if the calculation isn't clean in the future? If you're faced with another impossible choice? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Sir, I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. Harrison closed the file and stood. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, by the authority vested in me as base commander, I'm hereby reassigning you to active sniper duties, effective immediately. You'll work directly with special operations elements as needed, with full autonomy in tactical decisions. Elena's breath caught slightly. Sir, are you certain? Staff Sergeant, Harrison interrupted, you just proved that you're one of the most capable precision shooters in the entire military. Hiding that capability in a supply warehouse is a disservice to every soldier who might need your protection. As Elena absorbed the magnitude of her new assignment, Captain Chen's radio crackled with an urgent transmission. Base Command, this is Regional Operations. Be advised, we have confirmation of additional sniper activity in your operational area. Multiple enemy shooters, coordinated positioning, estimated ranges beyond normal counter-sniper capability. Requesting immediate specialized support. Harrison and Chen exchanged glances. The first impossible shot had been just the beginning. Elena straightened, her earlier uncertainty replaced by cold determination. Sir, I'll need access to advanced equipment and real-time intelligence support. Whatever you need, Staff Sergeant. Whatever you need. The legend of Viper was about to grow even larger. By evening, the atmosphere at FOB Sentinel had transformed completely. Elena sat in the base mess hall, picking at a dinner that had grown cold while she reviewed tactical reports. Around her, conversations hummed with the kind of subdued excitement that follows extraordinary events. She had tried to choose a corner table, hoping to maintain some of her previous anonymity, but that proved impossible. Soldiers approached throughout the meal, some offering thanks, others asking questions about long-range shooting, many simply wanting to be near someone who had accomplished something they could barely comprehend. Staff Sergeant, a young private first class named Jackson, approached hesitantly. "My squad leader said you made that shot without computer assistance. Is that true?" Elena looked up from her reports. "Computer calculations are helpful, Private, but they can't account for every variable. Sometimes you have to trust training and instinct." Jackson nodded eagerly. Could you teach me? I mean, not the advanced stuff, but maybe basic precision techniques." Before Elena could answer, Corporal Mitchell appeared at her table carrying a laptop and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. "Staff Sergeant, you need to see this," Mitchell said, setting the laptop down. "The video I took this morning, someone leaked it to social media. It's gone viral." Elena's stomach tightened. "Corporal, that footage was supposed to remain classified." I know, but look at the comments. Look at the reaction." The laptop screen showed Mitchell's video of Elena's 6,000-meter shot, overlaid with technical analysis and slow-motion replays. The view count had already exceeded 2 million, and comments poured in from military personnel, law enforcement snipers, and civilian marksmen around the world. "This is impossible," read one comment. "No human can make this shot." "That's not a human," replied another. "That's a legend." Elena closed the laptop with more force than necessary. "Corporal, this kind of attention is not helpful. It compromises operational security and—" "Staff Sergeant." The voice cut across the mess hall like a command. Elena looked up to see Master Sergeant Morrison approaching, but his entire demeanor had changed. Gone was the arrogant swagger, the condescending smirk, the bullying confidence. In its place was something Elena had never seen from him, genuine respect mixed with profound shame. Morrison stopped beside her table and came to attention. The mess hall gradually fell quiet as soldiers noticed the unprecedented formality. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez," Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly across the room, "I owe you an apology, a public apology." Elena started to speak, but Morrison raised a hand. "For 3 weeks I humiliated and harassed one of the finest soldiers this army has ever produced. I mocked your service, belittled your capabilities, and treated you with disrespect that was both unprofessional and unforgivable." The mess hall had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working to listen. Morrison's voice grew stronger, more certain. "Today, you proved that heroism doesn't announce itself, that the most extraordinary people often hide in plain sight. You saved American lives with skill I can't even comprehend, and you did it after weeks of my abuse." Elena stood slowly, her expression unreadable. "Master Sergeant," she began quietly, "you don't need to—" "Yes, I do." Morrison's interruption was firm but respectful. "Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, call sign Viper, it is an honor to serve on the same base with you. I'm proud to call you a fellow soldier." Morrison stepped back and rendered the sharpest, most precise salute Elena had ever seen from him. The gesture held for long seconds, carrying the weight of genuine respect and profound regret. Elena returned the salute with equal precision. When both soldiers lowered their hands, spontaneous applause erupted throughout the mess hall. But the recognition was just beginning. The mess hall doors opened, and Chief Thompson entered, followed by the soldiers who had witnessed Elena's morning demonstration. They formed a loose line, and one by one approached her table. Sergeant Santos stepped forward first. "Staff Sergeant, on behalf of everyone with family at Overwatch 7, thank you for bringing them home." Santos saluted, and Elena returned it formally. Corporal Mitchell was next. "Ma'am, as someone who dreams of being half the shooter you are, it's an honor to serve under your example." The line continued. Young soldiers, senior NCOs, officers who had heard about the impossible shot secondhand but understood its significance. Each offered a salute, a word of thanks, or simply a moment of respectful acknowledgement. Elena accepted each gesture with the dignity befitting the recognition, but inside she felt overwhelmed by the attention. She had spent months trying to disappear, to become invisible and unremarkable. Now she found herself at the center of something that felt dangerously close to worship. As the formal recognition continued, Captain Chen appeared at Elena's side. "Staff Sergeant," Chen said quietly, You have a communication from Special Operations Command. They're requesting immediate deployment for a classified mission. Multiple enemy snipers, extreme range requirements, situation designated critical." Elena nodded, relieved to have a reason to escape the growing crowd of admirers. "When do they need me?" "Tomorrow morning. Transport leaves at 600. Elena looked around the mess hall, at the faces turned toward her with respect and expectation. These soldiers now knew who she really was, what she was capable of. There would be no more hiding, no more pretending to be something ordinary. "Captain," Elena said quietly, "please inform Special Operations Command that Viper is ready to return to active duty." The legend that Elena had tried to bury was fully alive again, and this time she was ready to embrace it. Later that evening, Elena packed her gear in the small quarters she had occupied for 3 months. The space looked different now, not because anything physical had changed, but because she was seeing it through new eyes. The careful anonymity she had constructed was gone. The comfortable routine of invisible logistics work was finished. Tomorrow she would return to the world where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death, where her skills would be tested against the most dangerous opponents imaginable. A knock at her door interrupted her preparations. "Enter," Elena called. Master Sergeant Morrison stepped inside, his cover in his hands, his expression carrying the weight of a man who had spent the day confronting the magnitude of his mistake. "Staff Sergeant, I hope I'm not interrupting." Elena continued folding her gear. "What do you need, Master Sergeant?" Morrison closed the door carefully and stood at attention. "Permission to speak freely, Staff Sergeant." Elena looked up, surprised by the formal request. Throughout their confrontation, Morrison had never shown her such respect. "Granted." Morrison's shoulders sagged slightly. "I need you to understand something. When I transferred to this base 6 months ago, I was coming off a bad deployment. We lost good people to sniper fire. Young soldiers who never saw it coming, never had a chance to fight back." Elena stopped packing and gave Morrison her full attention. "I developed, I guess you'd call it an obsession with proving that long-range shooting was overrated. That real soldiers fight close and personal. That fancy marksmanship was just show-off bullshit that didn't matter in real combat." Morrison's voice grew quieter. "When I heard about your supposed call sign, it triggered everything I'd been angry about. I thought you were another fake hero trading on stolen valor. I thought—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Elena sat on the edge of her bunk. "You thought I was lying about my service." "Yes." Morrison's admission came out like a confession. "And I was determined to expose you, to humiliate you publicly so everyone would see that these sniper legends were just myths." Elena studied Morrison's face, seeing genuine anguish beneath his military bearing. "Master Sergeant, there are a lot of people who exaggerate their military service. Your suspicion wasn't unreasonable." Morrison shook his head violently. "No, it was worse than unreasonable. It was personal. I was taking out my anger and frustration on you because I couldn't accept that some soldiers really are extraordinary." Elena stood and moved to her footlocker, retrieving the leather journal she had shown no one since arriving at the base. She opened it to a page near the middle and handed it to Morrison. "Read this," she said quietly. Morrison took the journal carefully and read the handwritten entry. "Day 127 in country. Patrick and I eliminated 3 enemy snipers who had been terrorizing a village outside Kandahar. Range, 4,200 meters. The villagers brought their children to thank us afterward. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, gave me a flower she had picked. She said her grandmother told her that angels watch over soldiers who protect innocent people. I told her I wasn't an angel. She said that's what makes me one. Patrick laughed for an hour afterward. Some days this job makes sense." Morrison read the entry twice, his hands trembling slightly. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Staff Sergeant, how many villages, how many children did you protect with shots like the one you made today?" Elena retrieved the journal and closed it gently. "Enough to matter, not enough to erase the ones I couldn't save." Morrison was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what Elena had accomplished during her years in special operations. "I need to ask you something," Morrison said finally. "When I was harassing you, humiliating you in front of the entire base, why didn't you fight back? You could have ended it at any time, one demonstration of your real capabilities, and I would have looked like a complete fool." Elena considered the question carefully. Master Sergeant, respect that has to be demanded isn't really respect. I had nothing to prove to you or anyone else. I knew what I was capable of. That was enough. Morrison nodded slowly, understanding. Until today, when proving it became necessary to save lives. Exactly. Morrison came to attention again, but this time the formality carried different weight. Staff Sergeant, I want you to know that I've submitted a formal letter of apology to your personnel file. I've also requested disciplinary action against myself for conduct unbecoming an NCO. Elena shook her head. That's not necessary. Yes, it is. Morrison's interruption was firm. What I did was wrong, and there need to be consequences. But more importantly, I want every soldier who reads that file to understand that true heroes don't always look the way we expect them to. Sometimes they look like quiet supply clerks who clean toilets without complaint and save lives without seeking credit. Elena extended her hand. Master Sergeant, we all carry anger from our deployments. The key is learning to direct it at the right targets. Morrison shook her hand gratefully. Staff Sergeant, it has been an honor to serve with you. When word spreads about what you accomplished today, and it will spread, soldiers around the world are going to be inspired by your example. As Morrison prepared to leave, Elena called after him. Master Sergeant, those soldiers you lost to enemy snipers, they would be proud to know their sacrifice motivated someone to respect the capability that protects others from the same fate. Morrison paused in the doorway, his back straight with renewed purpose. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. That helps. After he left, Elena continued packing in contemplative silence. Tomorrow she would return to the battlefield, but tonight she had learned something important about forgiveness, respect, and the courage required to admit when you're wrong. Some victories weren't measured in confirmed kills or impossible distances. Sometimes victory looked like a proud man finding the strength to acknowledge his mistakes and grow beyond them. 6 months later, Elena stood on the observation deck of a military training facility in Colorado, watching a new class of snipers work through precision shooting exercises. The mountain air was crisp and clear, perfect conditions for long-range marksmanship training. Below her, 12 soldiers, 8 men and 4 women, methodically engaged targets at progressively greater distances under the supervision of experienced instructors. These weren't ordinary marksmen. They were the first graduates of a specialized program designed to push the boundaries of what military snipers could accomplish. The Viper program, as it had become known, represented a fundamental shift in how the military approached extreme-range precision shooting. Elena's 6,000-meter shot at a FOB Sentinel had proven that previously impossible distances were achievable with proper training, equipment, and mindset. Captain Chen, now Major Chen, approached carrying a folder of performance evaluations. How are they progressing? Elena asked. Better than expected, Chen replied. Thompson made a confirmed hit at 3,200 meters yesterday. Martinez is consistently hitting targets at 2,800 meters. They're not at your level yet, but they're achieving distances that would have been considered impossible 2 years ago. Elena nodded approvingly. Distance isn't everything. Consistency, judgment, and psychological resilience matter more than maximum range. Through the observation deck's glass windows, Elena watched Corporal Mitchell, now Sergeant Mitchell, guide a new student through scope adjustments. Mitchell had become one of the program's most effective instructors, combining technical knowledge with the kind of patient encouragement that built confidence rather than fear. Any word on the overseas deployment? Elena asked. Chen's expression grew serious. Orders came through this morning. 3 enemy sniper teams operating in coordinated positions, ranges exceeding 4,000 meters. Conventional counter-sniper assets can't reach them. Elena had been expecting this call. Over the past 6 months, she had eliminated 17 enemy snipers at extreme range, each engagement pushing the boundaries of what military doctrine considered possible. Word had spread through both friendly and hostile forces that America now had capabilities that redefined the battlefield. When do we deploy? Tomorrow night. But Elena, Chen hesitated, intelligence suggests these aren't random insurgent snipers. These are specialists, professionals trained specifically to counter our extreme range capabilities. Elena smiled grimly. Good. I was getting bored with easy targets. As the training day concluded, Elena walked among the students, offering individual guidance and encouragement. These soldiers would carry forward the techniques she had developed, expanding the military's precision capabilities far beyond what any single sniper could accomplish. At the main building, she found a message waiting from an unexpected source. Master Sergeant Morrison, now stationed at a training facility in Georgia, had sent a handwritten letter. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, I wanted you to know that I've been assigned as an instructor for basic leadership courses. Every class I teach includes a session on recognizing and respecting excellence in unexpected forms. Your example has become a cornerstone of how I teach soldiers to identify and nurture capability rather than prejudge based on appearances. Thank you for showing me what true leadership looks like. Respectfully, MSG Morrison. Elena folded the letter carefully and placed it in her desk drawer alongside dozens of similar messages from soldiers whose perspectives had been changed by her example. A knock at her office door interrupted her thoughts. Enter. Sergeant Santos stepped inside, wearing the uniform of a newly promoted instructor. Santos had transferred to the training facility specifically to help develop the program that Elena had inspired. Staff Sergeant, the new class starts Monday. 32 students, including 12 international participants. The program is expanding faster than we can build facilities. Elena looked out the window toward the distant mountains where students were still practicing as sunset approached. Are we maintaining standards? I don't want quantity to compromise quality. Standards are higher than ever, Santos assured her. We're not just teaching marksmanship, we're teaching judgment, patience, and the psychological discipline required to make impossible shots under extreme pressure. Elena nodded approvingly. Good. The distance means nothing if the shooter can't handle the responsibility that comes with this capability. As Santos left, Elena reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that morning at FOB Sentinel when Morrison had mocked her call sign. She had tried to hide from her capabilities, to disappear into anonymity and routine. But some skills were too valuable to waste, some legends too important to bury. The phone on her desk rang. She answered on the first ring. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, Viper Program. Viper, this is Special Operations Command. We have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Multiple hostile snipers, coordinated positioning, estimated ranges up to 7,000 meters. How soon can you deploy? Elena looked at her packed gear bag, always ready for deployment. I can be wheels up in 2 hours. Roger, Viper. Transport is en route. And Staff Sergeant, the targets you'll be facing tomorrow learned their techniques by studying your methods. They're specifically trained to counter your capabilities. Elena smiled coldly. Then they're about to learn why studying someone and facing them are completely different things. As she prepared for deployment, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had learned that true strength sometimes meant stepping back from what you did best, and true courage sometimes meant embracing the very capabilities you feared. But most importantly, she had learned that legends weren't built through individual accomplishments alone. They were built through the example they set, the standards they established, and the people they inspired to exceed their own limitations. Tomorrow, she would face snipers trained specifically to kill her. But tonight, she was surrounded by students who carried forward techniques she had pioneered, expanding capabilities that would protect soldiers for generations to come. Some legends were meant to be lived, not just remembered, and Elena Vasquez, call sign Viper, was living proof that the impossible was just another word for a challenge that hadn't been accepted yet. If you're hooked on stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more inspiring military stories like this one. Stories like Elena's remind us that true heroism often wears ordinary uniforms, that courage can live quietly until the moment it's desperately needed, that the most extraordinary people among us sometimes choose to hide in plain sight, carrying their strength with humility until circumstance demands they step forward and save lives. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more military and veteran stories. These true tales keep the courage alive for generations to come. And in the comments, Tell us where you are watching from and who's the quiet leader you'll never forget.